Alice is our foundation president for Calais County Master Gardeners. And just if you've heard Alice before, you know what a great speaker she is in terms of her experience and her knowledge, and just has a way to make the presentation go along really well. So, Alice, thank you for speaking today and coming in from that good weather and being willing to talk. So, Alice, I'm going to turn it over to you. We can see the screen and your presentation's up and running.
Good to know. Thanks, Gary. You've given me something that I have to live up to now. Great speaker, huh? Okay, thanks, folks. I appreciate you all being here. I know that you could be outside. I'm going outside as soon as we're done. I have to check what's going in my greenhouse at the moment. Let's get started. Today we're going to talk about the bugs that you want to come to your garden, and we have to know, first of all, who they are and how in the world do they get there in the first place, and how do they help control the garden pests, and more importantly, how to invite them and how to get them to stay. Now, beneficial insects are insects that suppress crop pests, insect predators and parasitoids, and they're both a little bit different. And there are some other insects, non-insect predators out there too, like spiders. Some people might use the term natural enemies to describe these groups. Now, predators are animals that attack and eat their prey. And they will pretty much, if they're in your garden, they'll eat anything smaller than them, or if they're really ambitious, they can eat somebody that's bigger than them. The individuals can eat more than their weight sometimes, and you'd be surprised. You can't see them all the time. That's the thing. You can't see them all the time, but they're in there working. And the parasitoid insects are a different kind. They don't eat their prey. They lay eggs in the prey and kill the host. And some of these little guys are so tiny that they are 1/25th of an inch, only a millimeter, and you can't pretty much can't see them with your bare eye. But they are there if you've got a good garden. So if you plant something, you're going to have pests. I mean, that just kind of goes with the territory, doesn't it? And keeping your garden healthy is the best way to reduce the impact of the insects that are pests. So how do the insects actually come? I mean, how do they know to come? How do the, let's say, flea beetles know to come to eat your potato or tomatoes and potatoes? How do they know? Well, many pest-infested plants, well, plants will give out a scent, and that attracts those pests because they know the dinner's coming. But many pest-infested plants, once the pests are on the plant, send out SOS signals. They're called semiochemicals, and they put them out in the air, and particular species of natural enemies can take that send in, kind of like that email message went directly to them. So ladybugs really aren't attracted to the aphids that are on your roses or on your tomatoes. They're attracted to that scent that the plant that's in distress is sending out. And sometimes they can be very specific. A corn plant sends out a specific chemical when it's being attacked by a corn earworm, and a tomato plant emits a different one, and when one of the hornworm caterpillars takes a bite into a leaf. So it's pretty amazing what they can do. They can also be brought in by other plants. We went to the nursery last year and picked up 4 or 5 pepper plants that my husband liked and brought them home, and 4 days later, I saw they had aphids all over them. I took it out, washed it off, but they were down inside the plant, and I didn't get them off. We ended up having to throw that plant away. I just couldn't get rid of it. And some of them can be hiding in the soil. So a very brief biology lesson. What you see isn't always what you get, because the immature forms of these insects may not look anything like the parent. There's 2 different kinds of metamorphosis: complete, like the butterfly, where you've got a butterfly, and then you've got the pupa or the chrysalis, and then you've got the the caterpillar that looks nothing like the adult the adult butterfly. And a lot of the ones that undergo complete metamorphosis will be that way. Now, the incomplete metamorphosis, the grasshoppers, aphids, and the stink bugs, they have smaller versions of the adult that may not look exactly like the adult, but they're similar. They're easier to spot in your garden because you have to know the difference between good guys, bad guys, which one's out there looks ugly, but it's eating the bad things. You have to know the difference. You have to be able to tell the difference. So you can see the butterfly lays the eggs, and out comes the little, come on, my mouse isn't working, there it is. Out comes the little immature larva, and then it goes into the pupa stage, kind of like a chrysalis, and then it comes out, it's the full-grown beetle appears. The stink bug, take a good look at this because you will find these in your garden. They look like little spiders when they first hatch from the eggs. Very, very tiny. Tons of them. They're so small you can't count the legs, but they all have this general appearance, kind of round on the bottom, pointed on the top, and usually they have some kind of spots around the edge. Keep an eye out for those because if you see those when they're small, you can get rid of them. So let's start off with some of the good guys. Ladybugs, everybody knows ladybugs, but what they don't realize is that we have a ton of different varieties. Everybody's familiar with this one. This is that Asian lady beetle that's kind of orange, and they congregate in your house. And even though those are a pest for us sometimes in the house, a nuisance, they're also very beneficial. This 20-spotted lady beetle's a little guy, just a little petite little thing, and you might not even recognize it as a lady beetle, but it is. All of their larvae kind of look alligator-ish, you know? So you want to keep an eye out for those. If you see anything like that, chances are it's a ladybug larva. They lay their eggs on the back of leaves too, but so do stink bugs. And there are some, I haven't put them, they're not here, but in the resource section, there are two really, really good free books that you can get. One from WSU, I think, and the other one's from Portland, the city of Portland. And they show pictures of the adults as well as the larvae. And you'll want to take a look at those so that you can recognize when you do have the good guys in your garden. So there are two different classes, like I talked about at the beginning. There are predators and parasitoids. Now, the predators, most of the time, are bigger than the prey, kind of like this praying mantis who is really enjoying his meal there. And they attack in the immature stage, the adult stage, or both. So you can get one of these baby praying mantises, and it's eaten like crazy, and it continues to eat when it's an adult. A lot of them, the larva will also eat, or maybe sometimes just the larva is the one that's causing the killing the pests in your garden, sometimes not. They're very mobile and they can catch prey. They can go after it. They can hunt it. And most of them are generalists. They will eat just about anything. They don't just feast on aphids. They'll eat lacewings and other things too. Now the parasitoids are a little bit different. They're usually very tiny. You may not even notice them, or if you do, you don't think anything of it because they're so small. The first time I gave a talk similar to this about this topic, I went out into my garden and I thought I better know what I'm talking about when I go out there. And I looked, I didn't see anything. And then I got my cell phone out. I had a hand lens too, but I couldn't focus on that. But I got my phone out and put it on magnify, and then I started looking in where the leaf attaches to the stem and under the leaves and on the flowers themselves, and I could not believe how many little beneficial insects were all over my garden. I don't use any kind of pesticides because I haven't had to. And that is probably the most important thing you can do to attract beneficials to your garden is not to use pesticides, or if you do, you use them correctly, and you only spot treat. You just don't go spraying just to spray because you saw one bug. Anyhow, these parasitoids, they kill pests when they're in their developing stage. I don't think the people out here in the Pacific Northwest so much have ever seen a tomato hornworm, but they're big. They're about the size of your little finger. And these tiny little parasitoid wasps, similar to this, and I mean, they're small. They're, about the size of your little fingernail, if not smaller. The tip of your little fingernail, if not smaller. The female pokes a hole in the caterpillar, puts her ovipositor in there, and lays eggs. And those eggs develop inside the caterpillar, and the cocoons, the white cocoons, pop outside of the caterpillar. Pretty soon it looks like it's, covered in these white spiky things. And eventually the new little wasps come out of that, and the caterpillar dies. And they're usually very host specific. Only a certain kind of wasp is attracted to the tomato hornworm. Then we've got all these predatory beetles, and I'll bet you've seen these beetles in your garden. Now, the rove beetles, these two, this devil's coach horse and this one, you don't see those very much during the day. You'll find them under rocks, underneath mulch, things like that, and they do a lot of good. They eat ants, maggots, earthworms, cutworms, slugs, and other beetles. So do these ground beetles. You've seen these scurrying around too. They move very, very quickly. This devil's coach horse is a pretty big guy, and we had a lot of those brought into the plant and insect clinic last year. They're over an inch long. They're pretty big, and they're kind of scary looking, but they're very beneficial. So don't just kill it because you think it's ugly. The soldier beetle is another really beneficial one, and we saw a lot of those last year too. Now, the green and brown lacewings, they're predators as well. You kind of have to have your eyes open for them. They're not very big. The ones I've seen are the green lacewings. The brown ones are out there too, but they're probably so nondescript you don't see them. They are beautiful, and they lay their eggs on a stalk, and it's the larva, this guy here, that does most of the work. They go after mealybugs and thrips and mites and whiteflies and aphids, small caterpillars, leafhoppers, and insect eggs, anything small enough that they can get their mouth into. And the snake fly, it's kind of scary looking, but it isn't. It's about 3/4 of an inch long, and it's commonly seen in the garden. We had several of those brought in because people hadn't noticed them before. And they're relatives of the lacewings and pretty much eat the same things that the lace bugs do. And I'm thinking that we had so many of these brought into the clinic for identification because more people were actually out there looking in their gardens, and people aren't using as many insecticides as they used to. And the more, if you can share this information and go out into your garden and look for them and get to know what they're doing, then you'll realize what a good job they're doing at taking care of your garden for you. It makes it easy for you. It's cheaper, you're not going out and buying bug spray. And here's some more predatory bugs. They are very tiny. The ambush bug, the damsel bug is a 1/2 inch long, but that 1/2 inch isn't very big. The big-eyed bugs are very tiny. I found a couple of those on my plants, but boy, I had to look. And the next time when I blinked my eye, it was gone. But the nymphs here can eat up to 1,600 spider mites during their development, and the adults feed on about 80 to 100 mites a day. The assassin bug is kind of cool. I've actually never seen one of those. I know they're out there, but I haven't seen one of them. They're bigger. They're about 1/2 inch, maybe a little bit over 1/2 inch long, and they're that orange color. But they can also range from black, brown, or red, and they'll eat a variety of insects as well. Ambush bugs are kind of cool. I've also never seen one of those in person, but it could be that I just wasn't at the right place at the right time. And they specialize on insects that are actually on the flowers. And some more predatory bugs. We're getting into the parasitoids, but here's some more predatory bugs. This is the minute pirate bug, and you see his size at 1/12 to 1/5 of an inch, teensy tiny. And this is the immature stages. But look at him going after that aphid there. Stink bugs. Most of the stink bugs we have here in the Pacific Northwest are the bad guys. They're the brown marmorated stink bug. And he's got banded antenna, he's got banded legs, and he's got these markings around the edges. Now, this is the good guy. He'll go out and kill things. But look at the difference between his shoulders and the brown marmorated stink bugs. He's got little spiky things. He's the good guy. So keep an eye out for that. I haven't seen many of the rough stink bugs, but I have seen lots and lots of the brown marmorated stink bugs. There is some good news out there for the brown marmorated stink bug. I think I'm going to be talking about that a little bit. There is a parasitic wasp out there that is, I think, starting to decimate the population, which is a blessing because I'm tired of the cats bringing them in on when we open the door to let them in the house. And there are a few more of the predators. Of course, our big praying mantis. Mantid insects are generalists, which means they will eat the beneficials too. A lot of the beneficials will eat other beneficials, but they still do more good than harm. But sometimes if you bring praying mantises into your garden, they will eat your beneficials too. So I don't recommend going out to Wilco and buying a bunch of praying mantises. If they're there, that's fine. Just keep an eye on them. And spiders do an amazing job of trapping and hunting down prey in your garden. Some of these look like flies and wasps, don't they? But wasps and bees. These are bee mimics. You can see one here. You can see one here. This one was brought into our clinic, and we spent a lot of time looking at it before we realized that it only had 2 wings. Flies have 2 wings. Other insects, bees and wasps have 4. And once we realized that we were dealing with a 2-winged insect, we realized it was a fly. And a lot of them look like they're hover flies. If you see them hover, that's what they are. They're a syrphid fly. They're a beneficial insect. Some of the sweat bees that we've seen are, they're not really bees. They're also syrphid flies, the way they hover. Here's that tomato hornworm. This little bitty, tiny, let's see if you can, you figure it's about the size of one of these. And this is granted, this is a large caterpillar, but they're very small. They lay their egg. These are the cocoons that are coming outside the body of the caterpillar after the wasp has laid the egg in there. It's kind of like where Alien came from. There's a great YouTube video out there if you ever want to see it. In fact, look at it. I think it's called, if you do Alien and tomato hornworm, it's only a 2 or 3 minute video, but it's fascinating. Now, Newman wasps are kind of scary looking. Some of them are small, some of them are very large, and they've got this long abdominal segment there. Sometimes it's twirling up, sometimes down, and they're all beneficial. Don't kill them. The ovipositor sometimes can be very, very prominent, but that's what they lay their eggs with. And a lot of these wasps will lay eggs inside aphids. And if you look really close at the back of plants that had aphids in them, you'll see these shells, the mummies of the aphids, and they'll have holes in them from where the little wasp actually came out after the mother laid its egg in there, and it came out. Pretty fascinating. So this is what I was intimating before. This is what we think is going to help get rid of the brown marmorated stink bug. And for the past Last year, not so much, but before that, our whole house would be covered with them. The greenhouse, everything I turned over had dead stink bugs in it because they had overwintered there and had nothing to eat. But I didn't see many last year, and I have seen none this year. And usually if they're around, they'll come out on the warm winter days, and I haven't seen any. This is the kind of damage they do to your the apples and the pears. Tomatoes look a little bit different, but it's kind of a pithy substance inside the fruit because it has a proboscis. It's like a big straw, and it pokes a hole, and it injects something to make the fruit a little bit easier for it to get out, and then it draws it out. But when it injects that something, it damages the fruit. We don't want the brown marmorated stink bug. Now we get to the parasitoids. They're my favorite. The Tachinid flies are kind of fascinating. They're bristly little things. They range from about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch long, and you think that they're just plain flies until you take a closer look. So if you see flies buzzing around your garden, they're not house flies. Chances are they're not horse flies either. Chances are they're Tachinid flies. They lay eggs either on their hosts or on the plants close by to where the hosts are, and the young larvae bore their way in to the caterpillar host, and they feed on the internal organs until the host dies, and then the larva emerge to pupate. And here's some different kind of flies that you may or may not have seen. These are robber flies, 2 different kinds of robber flies. And this guy, I've seen these in my garden. They're a beautiful metallic green. They almost look like metallic green mosquitoes because of their long legs. And here's another robber fly. These are both robber flies. This is a bee mimic, obviously. And this is another bee fly. This is the guy that one of the guys that we had into the plant and insect clinic, and we thought it was a bee until we looked at it more closely. So just a quick summary. The predators, here's the ones that we talked about, and the parasitoids, and here are the things that they help to control. And even though you may not see them, they're in your garden. They're working. They're trying to keep that balance between the insects that are damaging your crops, the things that you're growing. But how do you get them to come? How do you get them to stay? First of all, you have to have something to feed them. Be willing to allow some garden pests for the good guys to eat. Having a pest buffet, having a few pests is the best possible attractant. That gets them there. One of the things that you can do that I thought was pretty clever, plant a plant trap to maintain aphid predators. And a crepe myrtle, it's one of those things, if you plant it, then aphids are going to come. And it blooms from July to September, so it's attractive to a lot of insects for most of the season. And it's a buffet for 20 to 30 of the different beneficial insects. And it provides nectar and pollen to pollinators and beneficials during the drought periods. And if we're going to have the good guys, we also have to be willing to put up with some of the bad guys. The thing to remember about this is the aphids that come to the crepe myrtle attract a certain kind of aphid. They aren't the kind that get on your garden plants. So even though it attracts aphids, it's not dangerous to your garden, but it will bring the beneficial insects in close proximity to your garden, which is exactly what you want. Aside from actually having the pests in your garden, making your garden attractive to beneficial insects, keeping pesticide use to a minimum is an absolute must. People think that when they spray an insecticide that it's only killing the bad bugs, but now that we realize that the insects that we can't see are there too, we're killing them as well. And some of those little bitty parasitoids, the ones that are, a millimeter in size, 1/125th of an inch, they are much more sensitive to pesticide sprays. And if you use a pesticide spray, it'll kill both like I said, both the beneficials and the pests. But guess who's going to come back first? The pests will, and the pests will also come back. The ones that survived, they're going to be stronger and more resistant to the pesticide. So I just, if you see an insect, a pest insect, smush it, wash it off with water, see if that takes care of the problem. Frequently it will. But if you do use a pesticide, read the label. Let me see if I can, I don't know if I can't share. Yes, I can share that with you. This link here will take you to a page that shows what the least toxic pesticides are. Some of the insecticidal soaps, the insecticidal oils, some of the insecticides. BT is one that's specific for caterpillars and codling moths, spinosad. They do have special instructions on how to apply them to minimize the damage to beneficials and pollinators. But on the other hand, you really still want to keep that at a minimum. And follow the directions, because the directions will tell you for a lot of these, apply at night after the pollinators are in bed, and by morning it's pretty much not so toxic to them anymore. But for example, I had flea beetles on a tomato plant, and I really should have just thrown the tomato plant out. It was my fault. I wasn't paying attention to it, and it got out of control. I should have thrown it out. As it was, I sprayed it, but I was very, very careful. I put cardboard around where I was spraying so that it didn't hit the other plants, and I sprayed that plant pretty well, and it did take care of the problem, but I don't like using anything. And I had used spinosad, so I applied it at dusk, and by morning, at least the pollinators wouldn't be affected if they happened to land on my plant. One of the other things that you really got to be aware of is you never, ever use a pesticide on something that's flowering, for obvious reasons, because it really attracts pollinators, and you don't want pollinators on a plant that's just been sprayed with any kind of insecticide. So what else can you do to attract them? At least 10% of your garden space should be saved to plant plants that will attract beneficial insects. You want to be able to provide some kind of bloom from early spring until late fall. You don't want to plant a plant here and a plant there. You'd like dense plantings. That also gives the insects a place to hide if they need it. And native plants are really great if you have the proper habitat for them. You know, there's a craze now. Everybody says, go plant natives. Well, that's all fine and good, but an awful lot of, like in the city, you may not have the right place for these natives. A lot of the natives like forested areas. They like deep shade or partial shade or deep humusy soil from being out in the forest. You have to read about them before you plant them. If you're going to use native plants, make sure that you're planting them in the proper place. But we have a lot of non-natives that we can use too, including annuals and perennials. A lot of trees and shrubs have great flowers, and grasses are a really good place for spiders and some of the other insects to take refuge in, and it's a good thing to have in a planting around your garden. You should have a bunch of different flower shapes, and we'll talk about those. You want umbrella-like clusters like dill and angelica and fennel, and composites like daisies and sunflowers, and things that are spiky like liatris. And they need trees and shrubs for protection against the wind and rain and predators. So let's put that all together. They need water. So if you do spray your plants at all, you can spray very lightly in the morning so that you get just a little bit. They need to dry out because wet leaves can be a problem with diseases, for leaf diseases too, fungal diseases. But if you don't do that, at least spray the grass around your grass or mulch or whatever it is you have around your garden so that they have some water to drink. Clump-forming grasses and coarse mulch like arborist wood chips are really good. I use the arborist wood chips between on the ground. I should have taken a picture on the ground around my garden because number one, it keeps the weeds down. Number two, if it gets wet, it's not muddy. And number three, it improves the soil. And number four, it's a great place for the spiders and some of the other the ground dwelling insects to be. And I know they're there because my chickens are always looking for them. They're digging holes in it. And it creates a beetle bank where the beetles can hide, and you want beetles there. Another thing you can do, although if you're doing everything else right, you shouldn't need to, there are attractants you can buy that will send out one of those chemicals we were talking about that will call aphids to the garden. I would advise against going out and buying aphids, buying ladybugs or going out and buying praying mantises, because chances are they weren't raised around here for one thing, and they probably wouldn't stay in your garden because there's probably nothing in there. And as adults, they're just going to take their wings and fly somewhere else. Plant the right kind of garden and have yourself a few insect pests. If you really aren't getting anything and you're having a problem with insects, you may want to try one of the lures. I understand they're not particularly effective, but they're certainly better than buying insects and a lot cheaper. Arborist wood chips are what's left when they chop up trees that they chop down for utility lines. In our county, they're free. You can go out to Roy Morris Park. This is also in the resources. And you can collect it there. Great stuff, really great stuff. It's great for your soil, great for everything. And plant insectary plants. The small beneficials really like those, and they're easy to pop in between your, tomato plants and pepper plants and squash plants. It looks really pretty, and it does attract a lot of insects, good insects. So here's what you can do. You can make hedgerows. You can make rows, mixed planters, scatter the plants among your garden plants. Sometimes you can plant a row along a fence fairly close to your garden. But one of the things you still need to do, of course, is make sure that they're not harboring unwanted pests, which is always, always a problem. Well, not a problem. It's always a concern, I should say. But if you provide a diversity of flower shapes and sizes and ways of planting, get the right kind of colors like purples and yellows and whites, then you're going to have a great place for your insects, your beneficial insects. Here's what other people have done. And it's pretty too. It's really, really pretty. Here's some of the plants that you might want to plant. These are the umbel plants. Nice flat landing places. They're all members of the carrot family. And here's a list of them. These are all going to be available to you in the resources that I put over in the chat. You can see the different kind of things that they will take care of. These are the daisy, some of the daisy family ones. Cosmos is a really good one. So are coreopsis, and sunflower is amazing. Chamomile is a smaller plant, and it's also really good, and Leotris too. And this is what they attract. Here's some other ones. These are from the mustard family or the cabbage family. Basket of Gold is very pretty. Candy Tuft is a really early blooming one, and I put that out by my apple tree since it needs pollinated early. And Sweet Alyssum is great. It's an annual, but here in the Pacific Northwest, it reseeds itself. And if you plant those, you will never have to worry about having something for the pollinators. So here's some of the other ones that they attract. Here's some more ideas. Marigold's another one. You know, this is the true companion planting. There is no such thing as, this likes that, this plant hates that. The true companion planting is to use, when you plant a plant, say you want to put the short ones in front, the next ones in back, and know which way the sun's coming from so the tall ones don't shade the shorter ones. That's a way to have companions in the garden. But the most important way, as far as I'm concerned, companion planting, is to plant plants that attract beneficials. And here are some others. The other thing is to plant plants that bloom throughout the season. So in early spring, you'll have, if you've planted some of this stuff over the winter, they'll be coming into flower because they will have bolted and they're coming into flower early spring. Then these are the ones in early summer, midsummer, and you can see they overlap, and late summer bloom. You want to have something for them all year long. Or you can plant, you can plant an insectary garden. And the superhero for that, although it's really hard to find, is Korean mint. And I don't think you can appreciate it here. I'm going to do more of this year. This is where my squash were planted and a lonely tomato. I had a catnip plant growing out of the side of my raised bed. And by the time summer was over, that thing was 3 feet wide. And I had to keep chopping it back. Otherwise, I couldn't get to my squash. But it was covered in bees and other beneficial insects. I had absolutely no trouble in my garden last year. And I'm going to plant some other plants like that. I think I'll do dill and basil and plant them coming out of the bottom there because I don't really have a lot of room in those beds. So if I plant them down there, they won't be in the way and I will have no problem with that. Last year, I bought, you probably can't see these, but this is an insectary mix. It's got alyssum, basket of gold, false Queen Anne's lace, Siberian wallflower, creeping daisy, coreopsis, cilantro, cosmos. It has everything in it. And I'm going to plant that alongside my garden area. I haven't told my husband I'm going to do that because I think he's probably going to want to get out there and prepare it, right? Maybe. He says maybe. But they are really nice. And I've seen them 2 places, outside Pride and Johnny Seeds. I bought them from both just to compare. And I was telling you about those guides that you can download, encouraging beneficial insects in your garden. OSU has a nice one, that common natural enemies of crop pests, and WSU has a really cool one that shows, all of these show not only the adult insect, but the larval, the immature form, so that you'll get to know who's in your garden. And here are some more sources. Some people don't, actually, other than aphids, don't know what the bad guys are until they start seeing damage on their plants. This link will take you to WSU's Hort Sense, which is where we go and homeowners go to get information on how to take care of problems that they find in their plants. And this will give you an overview of all the pests that you might find in your gardens. And here are some native plants. This is that least toxic pesticide site I showed you before. And there are also some interactive sites that can, if you have a problem and you put it in, it'll give you some ideas of pesticides you can use if you have to, and exactly how to take care of it and how toxic they are. There's that chemical attractant I showed you. This is the website where I found that. And this pollinator, this comprehensive list of the different habitat plants to plant, it's a really good list. There's like 3 or 4 pages of plants that you can plant that we didn't even touch on. And some of the stuff I talked about earlier, but you can see last year's workshops here. You can see this year's workshops and the videos from all these talks that we have. And we also have a YouTube channel with all of our videos on it if you'd like to go there. If you're on Facebook, we would love to have you like us and share the posts that we have so the word gets out to people. And if you're here, maybe you'd like to become a master gardener. It would be great to see you. And go ahead and click that link. And I think this is what we covered. Who are they? We talked about the flies, beetles, spiders, wasps, true bugs, lacewings. Oh, I didn't talk about earwigs, but they're both, for the most part, good, as long as there aren't too many of them. They control by either preying on the pests pests or by parasitizing them and killing them that way. Recognize the difference between pests and natural enemies and minimize using chemicals on your garden. Grow a lot of different kind of plants, different sizes, different shapes, colors, anything that will give protection and lure them into your garden. Give them some water and let a few plants grow that'll attract them. So go out there with your phone and start looking around. One other thing before we get up, there has to be a good balance. The other thing you have to realize is once you see aphids, for example, on your, on your tomatoes, give it 2 weeks because it takes that long sometimes for the plant to send out the signals. The pest will always be the first one there, and there will be a wave, a delay there before the beneficial insects show up, unless you have planted a crepe myrtle, in which case they're right there looking for something else to eat. Longview had a problem with mosquitoes. I'm not even sure. I think it was before we got here 10 years ago. And they started a spraying campaign. And lo and behold, the next year, all of their beech trees were covered with aphids. Aphids everywhere, because when they sprayed, they killed everything. They disrupted the balance, which is what will happen if you just go out and spray in your garden, just indiscriminately spray. You kill the insects that are good and bad. And I don't know if Longview, if it's ever recovered. I know a couple years ago they were talking about spraying again, and citizens got upset about it, and I think they talked them out of it. If they let it go long enough, it'll all come back. But anyhow, that's all I have.